Okay. Oh, okay. So, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so spirit, what is or what? Oh my goodness, I'm just worried about these cards are so jumpy. It's so exciting though because I love this deck. What I was oh, there's the moon. Oh my god, the 5 of cups. So there's like this deck immediately already has like foundational messages it's trying to get across. 8 of cups is one of them. The king of cups is one of them. Um 5 of cups is one of them. The emperor is one of them. There's just certain cards that I've been seeing like again and again and again. And then there's other cards that I have not seen yet, like the chariot, or like the world. Like there's ones I wouldn't know. But there's ones that are being coming up again. And the cup cards are a big and important suit. Yeah, the 7 of swords come up, like those ones. But the question is, what do we do? How do we spirit? How do we help solve climate change and help literally heal the world? There's almost this idea of like an embodiment needing to happen and like allowing the shadow to lead or like the spirit behind the fold to lead. It's funny because this was prompted by de-extinction. We've got chickens here twice. And yeah, this was prompted by the idea of de-extinction because I watched a video on it. And it's funny because my dad today was talking about gene manipulation and how it was seen as one of the, I think, one of the sins in the Bible. But I'm like, what is sin? Because like I don't know. I know that some people take really strong stances on manipulation of the genomes. I think that's what they're called. And people have a lot to say around them, and there's a lot of fear, and a lot of like ethical questions around them. And I acknowledge that. And I really don't know exactly where I stand on all of that. I haven't been able to think about it enough to know exactly where I stand. But it does seem like there is a need to kind of return what was lost. And there's this need, I feel like what de-extinction can do in terms of the spiritual lens to see it as less negative than as less negative, because I think it has a pretty negative perspective in the spiritual lenses. You could see it as a return of the spirits and the origins and the ancestors to a lot of being creatures that exist now that have lost different dimensions to their family tree because of climate change, climate disaster, evolution, human interference, blah, 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 blah. A lot of different parts of family trees have been cut off, have been lost because of that. A lot of family lines have gone extinct in the creature world, in the animal world. We are animals, of course, but because we see ourselves as so distinctly different, you kind of have to refer to them as different things. So for animals, they have lost many, many, many ancestors, many, 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 many expressions of themselves. And there are few lines that carry on the entire name for their species. There are few, lines, lasting descendants that represent the whole. And what de-extinction can do is it can return the ancestors. It can return the lost species. So it is, in a sense, trying to, bring back what was lost. But it's more like painting or reconfiguring a memory. It's more like giving them it's almost like bestowing a spiritual gift, like clairvoyance, onto, creatures that, uh, didn't have access to like, what would have been triggered by those ancestors. Like, whatever spiritual gifts those ancestors had to give to them, they aren't able to use them. They've been cut off from them because they've been cut off from those ancestors because those ancestors have been killed out, wiped out. Um, but de-extinction could be seen as this process of kind of bringing back that those genetic gifts, those genetic superpowers, super healing traits. Like, animals are healers too, right? They maintain the earth, they and maintain these ecosystems. They bring a lot of great things to the planet when they're in the right environment. But killing off lines within species kills off certain gifts, kills off certain intelligences, it kills off certain knowings, certain spiritual understandings, certain scientific understandings of how to be a caretaker in this earth. And so, what de extinction can do is it can kind of open the door back to those creatures being able to remember what their ancestors knew and what instinctually lives in them as members of this species. So it can do things like that, like among birds, which is what the example they were giving with the passenger pigeon. Um, and it does not recreate old DNA, it creates something new entirely. But we would have to accept, though, that it's almost like human beings are then going to be ascending to a different level of seeing themselves, because you would step into a godlike position, to be completely honest, because you're affecting, you're bringing back, right? Like, you're bringing back what we have once deemed to be lost for a very long time, which is exactly what astronomers were doing when they built the telescope, right? And they started to be able to recognize, or that there were so many more stars in the sky than you thought. You're able to see something that was lost from your understanding for a very, very long time, in this sense, for pretty much ever, because the human eye is not trained to be able to see that well. But there was a point in the existence of your soul in which you knew that those stars were there, but you just couldn't see them. There was no verification, and it's kind of like that's what it's like for the animals. Like, there are ways that they know that they should be able to help. There are ways that they know that they should be able to fight back against what's happening to their environment, but they can't. They don't have the tools. They don't have the technology. The technology being those DNA codes that have been lost with the lines of their ancestors that were killed or that died off because of our impact. Yeah, there's like a collaboration of divine forces that we need to recognize. And I think that we're going to be taking on a lot more power with de-extinction, and a lot more responsibility. And I think the reason a lot of people are scared is because there's certain people you wouldn't want to be a god, right? You wouldn't want certain people to have that kind of power, to have that kind of impact. And if we introduce things like de-extinction, you open the door for many people to understand how they could possibly be a god, right? Especially because science is something that it's a language, it's a system that was built by humans and can be understood by any human. In their own distinct way, and that information leads to the creation of things like de-extinction, which leads to putting you in this position of power where you might be kind of like a god. So there's a lot of contention around that, and stress around that, and fear around that. um, but it's kind of what I was talking about in the previous video, where it's like we're trying to understand what happened or where this is coming from, and like there's this need it's like adaptation must come out of survival, and the contracts that we sign are the contracts that we sign to get us to a better place or to help in the ways that the current our present world needs help. And we literally do create the future, so we can't just sit on our behind and expect that everything will be okay, and then 50 years from now be like, well, what happened? We have the ability to do something now, and we kind of need to make a decision. um and so, yeah, it's kind of like, what choice do you want to um make a decision now. um Yeah, there's the Chariot. Four of Wands and the Chariot. Yeah, I mean, there is this energy of needing to see yourself, and like this energy of revelation, but it's also this understanding of, it is going back to the beginning, because it's like, that part in the Bible where Adam names the animals. I don't think that naming of the animals was, I right now in this specific moment, I don't consider that to be literal. What I consider that to be is studying. When you study something, when you learn something, you name it. When you name something, you push it into existence and ground it, because you give other people a way to reference it and understand it. You build language. Language is about camaraderie. Language is inherently trying to understand each other. It's trying to build connection. It's trying to build community. So when Adam was naming the animals, Adam was trying to build community and connection with animals. It's the same way we name gods. There's no god that is told. Well, I don't know. I don't know all the stories about all the different gods, but that saying, like my dad always says this, is that, the angel was like, you can't pronounce my name, you don't know my name. But angels have names for us, to us, and that's because we give those names. We create language to create that bond and that connection, and it's not a power thing. It's actually, it's an attempt to be humble, and to have humility, so as to understand, so as to acknowledge that you want to have something to call this by. You want to be able to reference this. You want to be able to cite this. You want to be able to call this by name. You want to have that type of connection, you know, um, and you want this to be named. Why was I saying this? Because I was talking about, like, so when Adam was naming, he was studying. What he was doing was he was learning about the animals. He was understanding the many different creatures of the earth, and that's something that we need to get back to. And perhaps this process of de-extinction, maybe it's not going to lead to actually using extinctive methods to prevent or to help heal the world during climate change, though instead perhaps it's just going to lead to a deeper camaraderie with other animals as a whole, and begin to mend that relationship through understanding, through knowledge, through learning from these creatures, understanding understanding them, and the gifts that they have when it comes to keeping the world in balance, because that's something that is not necessarily a natural gift of people. It's not necessarily a natural gift of human beings to be able to work really, really, really in balance with the planet. That's definitely a gift of other animals, but that's something that we struggle with. And where we struggle with that, we need to be able to lean on other animals. But in order to do that, we have to be at a certain level of consciousness to recognize that you can learn from animals. The animals have something to teach you, and to not see animals as something speaking to something below a human being, but rather equal to, or if we do want to work in hierarchies, above, because the animals were there before people were there. So the animals are truly wise to understanding this planet and know this planet in ways that we never will. And they have that information because they drink the same water that we drink, and they eat the same nutrients that we eat. And all of that is recycled. all of that is the earth again and again and again. So they know the earth. They have a deeper knowing and understanding of the earth than we will ever have. And there's a lot to learn from animals. There's a lot to learn from the first people, the real, the original people, which are animals. Queen of Pentacles. And I think that learning about the animals will really help us understand a lot about ourselves, because there's so much of them that exists within us that we don't want to accept. Like, like you eat chicken, you eat fish, you eat cows, or you eat lettuce, you eat carrots. You're eating all these other life forms, but then you don't want to imagine that they are you. But they are you, literally. They make up your I don't know if it would say your DNA, but they make up your body's like codes. They make up your body's makeup. So like much of what they are, you are. And so there's so much to learn, and all you really need to do is sit over a bowl of water and begin to ask questions, because the water within you will connect to the water in the bowl, and they will create a line of conversation, a channel for you to begin to sift through, understand, and work through. There is something about water, and I just can't. Oh, Yamaya. Yeah, and look at this tower. And it's a fallen over tree, but out of the tree, now there's a new leaf growing, and that makes me think about this guy that made a post in a Facebook group that I'm a part of, that was talking about how trees have he didn't realize that this tree, this mother tree, had a whole other life waiting to spring from it, because it was dead, and it had been dead for a while, but and they had just not cut down the tree yet. But then they cut the tree down, and then within a few months, a whole bunch of new branches started springing from it. And we have some trees behind this building that are like that, like out of the cut down stumps, a whole bunch of branches and new sprouts have began to spring from it. And he didn't realize, and I didn't know this either, that that's a way that trees could reproduce. And of course, it's not like that mother tree is just cloning herself. That's a new generation, but it has some of her knowledge within it. And I remember, I think there was one, I think maybe in my conflict resolution class, we spoke about, there was a video about trees and how when a tree dies, or maybe this is in a show that I watched, that there was like a whale that was trying to pass on information to the generations, to its descendants, to teach it about humans and how to survive in a world of humans, and what to do and how to fight, and all these things. But there's just so much in the decaying process, that can be awoken. And the thing with de-extinction and the cells that are being used, they're cells that have been through the decaying process. They've already been through the death process, because they're cells from animals that are dead. So it it presents a really, really interesting discussion on what, like, what knowledge is being brought, what new knowledge is being brought to the table when you take old cells and of old lines within species, and introduce them to the descendants, because it's not only introducing their ancestors, but it is also introducing the descendants of the descendants, because there's new knowledge that comes from the death state. And that's what distinguishes an ancestor from a descendant. The descendant has the awareness from the death experience, from the decaying experience, that the ancestor doesn't have, because the ancestor came before that. the ancestor actually represented life. You could say that we represent death because we represent the end of our ancestors and the introduction of the death state, which introduces knowledge and growth and awareness, darkness energy, and yeah, but it, that comes with the tower though. Oh, and I had this theory that the planets were moving closer together, um, but that we couldn't see that because of light pollution. I have not thought about that. I haven't thought into it at all or looked into it at all. So I'm not like, I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough. But I did have that theory. So there's that. There is that. But anyways, I think that's all for right now. So I'll leave it there and chat with you soon enough. I'm so glad I bought this deck. You have no idea. I'm like very, very happy with this deck. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, see you later.